I've had with an academic journal which had accepted a paper that I presented at last year's conference.
Right.
They didn't realize that it was partly drawn from the conference. It went through the peer review process, got accepted, and then when they realized that it was based on a paper presented at the conference, they said no.
Okay.
And this was because their standard, their editor's decision is that previous publication includes a conference paper that is now available online.
Oh, that's interesting.
They told me I should pursue this, and I'm like,
okay, yeah.
So I'm just wondering, would your definition of previously published material constitute a conference paper that appears online?
I'll give the press's view of that, but I'm also going to ask Kel to make a comment from ASPP's perspective, because this is an area obviously that's shifting very rapidly in terms of electronic rights and what exactly constitutes publication. A lot of universities are currently now struggling with this question of how much do they acknowledge on electronic publication, particularly online, like on the web publication as legitimate or publication. From my perspective, in the case of a conference proceeding that was only available in electronic format, that hadn't gone into a hard format, I'd want to know about copyright. That would be my first question, is who owns the copyright to that material? Was that something that had been signed over? So in terms of our own legal standpoint, if you still own the copyright to the material, it's been published on the web, sort of open access, legally, I would not consider that previously published. You run into issues with marketability because, I need to then say to myself, well, and it is such a gray area, if this material is available freely, who's going to buy the book? So it would really have to depend on, I'd say, on percentage. But the copyright question is certainly one that I would want cleared up right away. Some of my answer would also depend on Kel's answer. So, because funding really is very much an issue. So, this is something that we're all struggling with, to try and draw that line, that constantly shifting line about what counts as publication.
My answer would be pretty much the same as yours. This is, again, a very new area, and it's moving, and nobody's determined anything. I did have a submission last year, I guess, for something that was already available in open access, the whole book. Mm-hmm. But at that point, it had not been sort of peer reviewed and everything. Mm-hmm. So in fact, mm-hmm. the thing that was going to come out at the end, if it did get approved, was probably going to be substantially different from what was on mm-hmm. there. So yes, I feel, aside from the issue of copyright, which really, of course, the ASPP doesn't deal with that. I mean, that's a publisher's mm-hmm. headache rather than ours. But the notion is, what process has it gone through, mm-hmm. and what was sort of the intention for it? I mean, the intention is, you give a paper at a conference. Giving a paper at a conference is not the same thing as publishing a book or publishing an article in a book. So if it's just, a conference proceeding that happens to have been published, I mean, that we don't actually support unrevised conference proceedings anyway. So
no, and we don't publish.
Yeah, so they're relatively, usually that sort of takes care of it. You will have had to have revised it before it gets to this stage. Otherwise, again, no, I think I would not be particularly inclined to consider that previously published. Probably also depending. I mean, if it's an entire book, but again, the circumstances under which that would happen are.
But as a chapter of a larger work, I would not look at it as previously published if it had passed through no peer review and under those circumstances.
And I do, when I get submissions, I mean, I do generally check on the web. I'll look for the author. I'll look for certain material from that author. And if I see something that looks to be exactly the same thing, I'm going to talk to, because the editor may not know that even at that point. So I'll talk to him or her about it.